Also, Redlettermedia complains about Obi-Wan's line, "This weapon is your life," saying Jedi wouldn't believe war was important. They didn't believe in war for the sake of war. War in defense of the innocent, certainly. Isn't that what Luke's training was about? So he would defeat his father and the Emperor, and didn't he even use the Force to cause 2 of Jabba's guards to drop dead? Didn't Luke use the Force to blow up the Death Star? Didn't Luke use his lightsaber to fight Jabba? Then he goes on to question how important the lightsaber would be compared to the Force, saying Yoda never even trained Luke in it. Where to begin? 1. If we accept the fact that the Jedi are trained in both the physical and superpower combat, and lightsaber fighting is their main form of physical combat, it is automatically important. 2. They certainly do more than paying lip service to the physical part, as Obi-Wan used his lightsaber against Vader. Vader uses it in each original film. Luke uses it against Jabba. Like with Yoda, he undervalues the importance of the physical parts, as the Jedi simply aren't that powerful. They are still humans with limitations, and that is good, as if there not be a little bit of tension. I mean, it would be like the Benders from Avatar: The Last Airbender, the show, not the movie, versus the Empire. There'd be no context. Luke also still uses his X-Wing. He didn't use the Force to bring down the Star Destroyer. Stuff like this happens in the 2D animated Star Wars Clone Wars series, and the same people complain about it being inconsistent with the weaker powers in the original trilogy and tensionless. They even say this about the prequels. So people, including Redlettermedia, complain that Jedi can do things like use the Force to jump safely from immense heights, yet in spite of you wanting them to be weaker, so much so that they would have big problems fighting. Group of droids. Those same people do want them to be supernatural. The lightsabers are very unimportant. Talk about self-contradictory. No, the Jedi have a certain level of supernatural abilities as to make them capable of protecting the galaxy, but not so much they don't need any weapons as they would actually be inconsistent with the original trilogy and make them too strong. Yet they are capable of making these jumps, as the Force did make these formidable enough to keep the peace for a long time. 3. Also, so accepting the need to fight a lot is what valued in the original trilogy. They, as I mentioned, used it extensively when fighting, but also, the first thing Obi-Wan did when introducing Luke to being a Jedi was give him a lightsaber, and Plinkett even mentions he thought they would construct their own ones as a rite of passage. If it is a part of the rite of passage ritual, why isn't it important? And Obi-Wan trains Luke in it. We simply don't see more of it in the Empire, as that was the slower, more spiritual chapter, and also the Force was part of the more advanced forms of training. 4. Excuse me, but aren't the Jedi based on samurai? Yet any samurai values his sword like his life. I mean, it is an extension of your arm, and in fact fighting with the sword is an intelligence and grace-based art. Again, to mention a great kids show, even the 2003 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles show will tell you that. 5. So accepting the Jedi is still also for a big part influenced by the physical way of their lightsaber as their most attributable, as they aren't allowed to have any possessions aside from that. Also, Redlettermedia questioning of the lightsaber Padawan training scene was really strange. He again complains we don't have a slow meditation scene, where, remember, in Episode 1 he preferred the action-oriented approach of the original trilogy. He says this again because it is just a kid's film. No, and it is an adult film, with romance, political intrigue, and drama, that simply has action and some slapstick. Just because it's PG-13 doesn't mean it's a kid's... Just because it's PG doesn't mean it's a kid film, sorry. He complains it isn't a Force-oriented scene. Neither are many scenes in the original trilogy. Jedi Knights and Samurai, and they have a scene in Episode 1 where they sense Anakin's feelings. Plinkett ignores a scene where they discuss arrogance in Jedi, where Anakin discusses their love doctrine, which was too boring, strict, and non-conventional enough, and they should instead have been regular sex-obsessed people. Yeah, I am sorry, but when you think of Eastern culture monks and Christian monks, what do they condemn? More sex and attachments? Or training in the arts of fighting and discipline to defend the weak? He questions if Luke understands Star Wars. He does. But does he? I mean, he seems to know little about the philosophies it is based on, or he wants them to water down the teachings to be more conventional from teenagers and modern people that buy new contraceptives every day. I guess, as he says, we, with who I assume he means, modern atheists, kid-hating people, couldn't relate to boring space aliens, which reviewer 1 as a Catholic wanted to say is horribly offensive. Well, this is offensive, but also argumental. By what a mainstream audience likes, which contradicted him criticizing Lucas for supposedly selling out, trying to appeal to a lot of people, and taking out the spirituality and replacing it with video game stuff. Also, so he doesn't want a scene with lightsabers, which are props where people are doing things, and instead wants a scene with people sitting around talking. Yeah, remember that for episode 3 rebuttal. Because where Plinkett criticizes all the scenes Jedi are sitting and talking, and wishes instead for kid, scene where things you can make the scene virtually interesting, and he uses a scene where Luke uses a lightsaber as example. Yet another blatant contradiction. And believe me, there will be more. He constantly criticizes Lucas for trying to appeal to mass audiences, yet judges the film constantly as entertainment for a mass audience. Also, he complains he found it hard to believe it would be a conventional Jedi training technique, as he assumed the laser shooting ball was just part of the games they were playing in 4. What? Since the Jedi have lightsabers, of which one of the main purposes is reflecting laser bullets and other forms of projectiles, they would obviously train in that. And he questions whether Obi-Wan would constantly keep such a floating ball in his pocket, and what for. Well, to keep his training of his defensive maneuvers up, and he can even use it to reflect his attacks on the enemies. To floating balls allowed for training in how to reflect and dodge attacks. Yet you are suggesting the Jedi couldn't use these. Well then, how do you expect them to train in reflecting laser blasters? By deflecting bullets from a giant laser gun that is attached to the ground like the kind that dodges tennis balls? Why use that when the ball is small and floats around, creating a more unpredictable attack pattern, thereby being more realistic? Also, he says, though, the helmet was just a space helmet. Well, yes, the Jedi in the training scene use different ones logically, but it is still logical they would use helmets as learning to fight blindfolded and in common practice for ninja and samurai. Again, just watch Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I know you're yelling right now, they were not using blindfolds. Well, as they are trying to train, not just in not using their eyes, but not their ears either, which the helmets cover also, they must use the Force. Also, another complaint is that Anakin and Obi-Wan would look bored. Obi-Wan was focusing his eyes and contradicting all his facial muscles due to sheer force of the whim, and Anakin simply looked focused, and Obi-Wan looked back and forth, constantly indicating stress. Another complaint was the assembly line sequence that any real person would get killed. Well, the machines weren't moving that fast. A human with fast reflexes could move through it. Oh, remember that meteor chase in Empire where they went into an meteor field? What were the odds according to C-3PO? It isn't impossible. Oh, and it wasn't pointless, as it showed how Anakin still had things to learn and how Padme was being too arrogant, not thinking through the situation, and how she got in the middle of the factory and was taken off guard and captured as a result. About the meteor chase. The reason Jango can't hit Obi-Wan's ship is because he is dodging him at a very fast speed, the same way that in 300 they hid from all the arrows under their shields and Jango was close on Obi-Wan, but was barely missing him. That happens a lot in real life. Shootouts like in the new Zorro films, you see that constantly, or Predator, or Lethal Weapon. Oh, and then we again get the complaint there is a lot of stuff in one shot. Again, that makes it more realistic and complex, and it clearly focuses on one thing, with the rest being in the background in the pod race, for example. Anakin was always clearly followed by the camera, and in the speeder chase, the camera always focuses on one ship, and he complains it is fast. Well, it is a modern action scene. He really couldn't follow Obi-Wan flying through rocks as dodging lasers. Remember the chases in the new Batman films? The Siege and Return of the King? Just jumping on the jellyfish and finding Nemo? Any chase scene in Aliens or The Abyss? Or in the Mission Impossible films? Or Men in Black? Or Gladiator? Or Black Hawk Down? Or Thelma and Louise? Or the original Star Wars trilogy? Or Jurassic Park? Or Saving Private Ryan? Or Close Encounters of the Third Kind? Or Kill Bill, Volumes 1 and 2? Or Die Hard? Yeah, that'll do. No, seriously, the camera follows it clearly. Each shot lasts numerous seconds. We can clearly see what is going on. Also, R2 flying did make sense, as in Empire he was also floating in the water being controlled by a certain force, and R2 often has secret weapons he keeps a secret as long as possible. Remember his electric stick in Jedi? He always has secret release sources, since he was a very uniquely made droid for one battlecruiser. In the Episode 3 space battle, the camera centers on the ships of Obi-Wan and Anakin, and backgrounds in large battles is normal. The only difference with most other films is that stuff actually happens in the background, which is realism and attention to detail, which is the artistic perfection that kids who want toys don't even care about. He says too much too fast will cancel out the excitement as it disconnects us from the reality. Yeah, real-life battles are even faster and more overwhelming. Overwhelming action scenes add to the realism, and the action isn't much faster than most modern action movies. And as background, like most action films in general, with big battles that simply actually have stuff happening, which again is in the background, so it doesn't distract, add to realism and rewatch value. And this isn't any different from the action scenes in Pirates of the Caribbean, Indiana Jones, and Lord of the Rings, all which have complex backgrounds. And in the Lord of the Rings films, in the background the soldiers just keep wrestling with each other, and arrows just disappear without anyone falling sometimes. So would you prefer that? Okay, I need a break. Oh wait, I do? Oh, Reviewer 1 says his OCD came back due to the annoyance of rebooting Plickett and Matthew, and he's also going to wash his hands non-stop for the next 50 hours. Okay, well good luck with that. And oh wait, good, some more stuff about the lightsaber use. Plinkett makes the remark Lucas didn't know how to create exciting action scenes without having someone whip out a lightsaber. Well, if you don't count the pod race, the Gungan droid battle, the speeder chase, the asteroid chase, the space battle of Coruscant, the chase after Grievous, the clones versus the droids, the sea monster chase, and the running of the blockade, then yeah. And he says he knows they are Jedi and all, but he just equates this to dangling a shiny object in front of a cat. You mean that showing cool special visual effects and weapons is wrong in an action scene? Action scenes are always about complex moves and showcasing exciting visual effects. Action itself is dangling shiny stuff in front of an audience, and you're going to argue that it's video game action? And that true action is about suspension strategy, but suspenseful action is only one form of action. Films with special visual effects like science fiction are also about the flashiness. And also, yeah, they are Jedi, so how are we supposed to keep lightsabers to a minimum? Having even more I drop my lightsaber shots and make the Jedi forgetful, or not having a Jedi play a big part. And more so, in that case the Jedi again would need even stronger force powers, meaning we would have some superhero-like action, like the speeder chase. Oh, and yeah, the kids probably had either training lightsabers or those of deceased Jedi. That is how knights and samurai do it. And how else would they train before they would construct their own? But also, Matthew has said Dooku would also be sent to the never-developed character graveyard and calls him underdeveloped like Darth Maul. Wait, what? Yes, Darth Maul had no backstory and little lines in screen time, but Dooku is given a lot of dialogue, giving him a backstory and complex personality, like Darth Vader. We see he used to be a good Jedi, but he became delusioned with the corruption in the Republic and became manipulative and violent to achieve a new world, and he has become very suppressive and cruel, as he kills anyone that opposes him, and he betrays his allies. He acts like they must separate, but in actuality wants to help start a suppressive empire. But unlike Darth Vader, he is also a lot more understanding and caring. He wants Obi-Wan to join him, as he cares about him, as he is the apprentice of Qui-Gon, who was his apprentice. And he is merciful, wanting to offer the Jedi to surrender. Yet he is also determined and harsh, and that immediately goes back to killing if they refuse to join him. But he isn't cold either. He is regretful over it, and he apologizes to Windu, his old friend, for having to kill them. So is he a tragic villain who retains some of his humanity? He simply believes the ends justify the means, like Qui-Gon, who probably got that from him, but he goes too far and is, in that sense, familiar to Ra's al Ghul, who Matthew praises as a great villain. And Matthew likes the Lord of the Rings films, while Christopher Lee as Saruman is that very similar, but has less of selfless goal nor retains his humanity as much. Also, he is loyal to Jango. His follower dies, and he feels sincere sadness, which makes the scene Windu kills Jango even deeper. Yet we see he is joining the dark side has been corrupted by it, being very arrogant, thinking he is even more powerful than Yoda.